Stonesboro Community Development District. This is Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. The time is 9:02 a.m. And we'll let the record reflect that all supervisors are present at roll call, with Supervisor DeBrino participating by conference call. Madam Chairwoman.
Okay. First thing, do we have any public comments? Okay. We're good with that. The next on the agenda is the interview with the attorney interested in our counsel. Can you come up, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're just staying here. Is that acceptable to the board?
Should
Can we turn this around? Is that right?
Yeah, maybe.
Thank you.
Maybe, yeah. He's got a big voice.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm short.
Okay. Before we start, let me introduce Mrs. Phil Olive, a board member, Chris Brady, a board member, Eileen Huff, chairperson, Phil Simonson, a board member, Jeff Nixon, our golf pro, and John Woodnick, our superintendent, and Mike DeBrino, a board member, is on the phone.
Thank you very much.
So,
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity and for making a proposal to provide legal services to the district. My name's Tony Pierce. It's called Anthony Pierce formerly, but I like to be called Tony. If I'm called Anthony, I know I'm in trouble. But anyway, we have another partner named Anthony, and the confusion can be interesting at times. With me is my partner, Lenore Breakfield, and Lenore will also provide her credentials. I think her credentials are all in the materials, our experience in local government matters, special districts, community development districts. I've lived in Collier County since 1975. Came here when roads were mainly 2 lanes. The interstate wasn't here. And started my work in the state attorney's office. Worked there for 4 years. Left the state attorney's office. Went to the county attorney's office in Collier County for 2 years. Still had a little hot dog left in me for litigation, so I went back to the state for 2 years. Did multi-jurisdictional racketeering, drug smuggling, homicide cases in all 5 counties in the circuit. And then went to work for Westinghouse Communities in Naples and Pelican Bay. I mean, no, that's quite the switch, but it's because of my experience dealing with Collier County zoning, land use, permitting matters. Then after a number of years there, 3 years, I worked with Mark Woodward, who's one of my partners, and some developments in Pelican Bay, and joined the law firm in 1986. Lenore, we'll give some of her background. Lenore, if you want to.
Sure. Hi, my name is Lenore Breakfield. So I've been with the firm since 2015. Prior to that, I worked for a firm that's based out of Syracuse, New York, in the Naples office, Bond, Shenick and King. And while I was there, I was lucky enough to work with an attorney that also did a lot of governmental work. So while I was there, we represented the City of Naples Airport Authority as well as Collier Mosquito Control District. And I kind of became the resident expert on sunshine law and public records. When I made the switch to WPL, I was very happy that Tony has such a big government base too, because not a lot of firms in Collier and Lee do government work. So Tony and I have been working on quite a few, I can't even think, maybe 10. We have 10 governmental entities that we represent right now. And the good thing is that Tony primarily attends meetings, but if Tony for whatever reason has a conflict, which does happen, especially in December where everyone's trying to get things done on a very expedited basis, I am the backup coverage counsel, and we keep each other informed of what's going on. So we also have another member who's not with us, who's an associate at our firm. So we have 3 attorneys that focus on this area of government. So we have a pretty deep practice as far as it goes in Collier and Lee.
Yeah, and the attorney that mentioned Zach Lombardo, he's listed in there. Zach's our associate, and Zach is our primary attorney handling Everglades City. We represent Everglades City. And one thing I learned a long time ago, that no matter the size or scale of a local government, they all have the same issues. It's just a difference of size and scale. And Everglades City has some unique challenges based upon its history of basically what's in the swamp. And its sewer plant is on an island surrounded by saltwater. And so there have been a number of issues over the years, and Zach and our partner Chris previously worked on a number of issues trying to get out of DEP compliance matters and consent orders and work through that, working through the agencies as well as obtaining financing. Our materials reference, we represent a number of community development districts. We represent the clerk of court of Collier County on an outside district basis, have since 1993. Crystal Kinsel is new clerk of court, and prior to that time, Dwight Rock was clerk of courts. We also represent currently the tax collector in Collier County, suing Airbnb over tourist development tax collections and remittances. And that's been an interesting. Dealing with a large organization like that and the techniques and tactics they utilize. But I have the questions. I appreciate Chuck and Debbie forwarding the questions to me that various board members have. There's no particular order. Do you mind if I go through them?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Years ago when I was addressing a jury, I made the mistake of calling somebody Miss, and there should have been Mrs. So is it Miss, Ms., or Mrs. Bush?
It's Mrs. Huff, but it's...
Huff, I'm sorry, Huff. Okay, thank you.
That's fine.
Question,
I've been called worse.
would I be attending our meetings? Primarily, yes, but again, as Lenore mentioned, we sort of tag team at times, we keep each other apprised, and if either one of us will be in person at the meetings, if that's the board's preference and desire. We're just right down the road in Naples. We're about a mile from the coastal mall on US 41. So we just hop on the interstate and we're here, unless we get lost and go to the wrong gate. So we both in today in separate vehicles.
That happens.
Because Google does, well,
Google puts you there.
puts you there, and Chuck's familiar in Fiddler's Creek, takes you to the back gate called Championship. And Lenore lives in Imperial in North Collier, and it takes you to the back gate of Imperial. So there must be some fiends at Google that like to make people take an extra trip. So that would be our intent, to attend every meeting. And one of the other questions was, do we charge a fee for the meeting or flat rate? Typically, we charge a fee, but I have some districts where I charge a flat rate for the meeting. $400 currently. If you want to make it $500, we'd be very happy if we choose us to be your counsel, but $400 we charge for certain other board meetings. It's not required by law that an attorney be in attendance at every meeting, but I find it, and I'm not saying this just to drum up business or have additional money, I think it's important because to get a sense of the actions that are taken, watching the body language, hearing the tone of voices, watching the public interact, seeing and hearing verbatim the records and the documents that the board is considering, I think is important to understand how to draft documents that the board wants. That's been my experience. Reading minutes doesn't quite cut it, even if they're verbatim minutes, and most minutes are not verbatim, it's often expensive to do verbatim minutes. Question, we are charged for district meetings or charged by the hour, just mentioned that. We have a number of attorneys, which ones will be representing, again, primarily myself, and then Lenore, and we may switch off and on, primarily myself. And do I have a working relationship with Chuck Adams and his company? Sometimes it's love-hate. Yes, we do. I've known Chuck for a number of years, way back in college in Martin. He worked for the management company, and then I represent River Ridge CDD, Fiddler's Creek CDD 1, Fiddler's Creek CDD 2, and Chuck's firm is the management company for those districts. And Chuck and I have a relationship. We're very candid with each other. If he has an issue with me, he would tell me. If I have an issue with him or his request for policies, I would tell him. And we work as a team, the other consultants. That's our approach. But with the recognition that the board, the district, is a client at the end of the day. And so if an issue comes to our attention that would be detrimental to the district, we would take action, typically in coordination with the chair and the manager, even before there might be a full board meeting, because our role is to zealously represent the interests of our client, that is the district, to the best of our abilities. And so the district manager is not our client, the district engineer is not our client, they are the staff of the client. And so we work with them, but if there's anything untoward that happens in any of those, we would bring it, we are required to, by Florida bar rules, to bring it to the board's attention. My role representing the district, I know there's also one question, how do we participate in meetings? Our role is that of an advisor as to whether something is valid, not valid, legal, or illegal. That's the opinions we provide. Years ago, when I was an assistant county attorney in Collier County, the county attorney and I, just two of us in the office, believe it or not, would rotate attending the county commission meetings. And the chairman one day asked me a question and said, big, tall David Brown, Doc Brown, out of Moffitt, 6'5", 6'6", and he said, "Counselor, how should I vote on this matter?" I said, "Mr. Chairman, I can't advise you how to vote. I can advise you whether it's legal or not legal. Counselor, I need you to tell me how to vote on this matter." And after 3 tries, he understood I wasn't going to tell him how to vote. And then I went and talked to my boss, the county attorney. He says, "Perfect, Tony, that's our role." But during the course of the meetings, I sit back and listen to the presentations and conversations. But if something comes up that hasn't been addressed as not being valid or kosher, I will ask for the chair's approval to address the board and say, hey, on this particular point, just to let the board know, here's this additional fact you need to know, and making a decision, or here's a legal issue that may apply to that particular circumstance. So I don't run the meeting, but we do participate and do answer questions from the board. And if a member of the public makes any inquiries of our office through emails, I will direct them to the chair and manager and say, should I answer that? Again, otherwise, we had an experience years ago, Chuck and I did at River Ridge. One resident, very active, was constantly emailing me with all these long, complicated questions. So I brought it to the board, and they actually adopted a policy and said, Tony, you can get emails from this gentleman. Send them to the manager, send them to the chair, and they will give you guidance, because otherwise it can get expensive. What's my experience regarding PPP? Personally, none. Our firm was a recipient of a PPP loan. Our partner, Mark Woodward, processed that. He's now in the process of applying for the forgiveness of that. And I have not personally submitted one or been involved in a PPP loan. And I'm not aware of any of my districts ever being a participant in the PPP program. Some communities are doing away with their CDD. Where do you see CDDs going in the future? And what would be the benefit to Stony Brook, if any, to not have a CDD? I still think there's a significant role for community development districts to play in the state of Florida. There are new ones being created all the time. You just look at the paper, look at the notices of assessment rolls and the projects that are going on, because it is sort of the purest form of local government infrastructure provision in the state of Florida. Cities and towns and counties can get far removed, but with the community development district, even though the landowner elections elect the board members for the first few years after the appointment, it still can show up in your neighborhood, in your community, or close by to participate and have a say in your assessments and in the programs. So I don't think they're going away in Florida. I think they're very strong. They had a bad rap a number of years ago with dirt ponds and some other bad CDDs that went kind of way south and crazy on certain things. But I still think they have a significant role to play. What would be the benefit to Stony Brook? That I really couldn't answer in all candor, because each community is different as to their needs and desire. And so it depends upon how much the district allows community to participate, what services are provided, and whether they're being provided efficiently and competently by the district. And there are advantages, as you all know. The sovereign immunity, the limited waiver, the tax exempt status for the sales tax and other. So there are some significant advantages to piggybacking the contracts. Also, in my opinion, the local government form of providing services is much more open. I don't like the term transparent, it's overused. Much more open because of the public records law and the Sunshine Law. Recognizing the Sunshine Law, some people don't like the Sunshine Law, but I think it's the purest form of watching debate take place and issues getting resolved. And as Lenore mentioned, she prepared a PowerPoint on the Sunshine Law and Public Records Law, and we made presentations on that. So I think that's an advantage to a CDD. And again, I don't know all the unique circumstances and the travails of Stony Brook over the years, but so I couldn't tell you whether it would be a benefit to not have it or to have it.
Can you not have one?
You can terminate, but there's strict conditions in the statute as to how you do that, where the debt has to go and what happens to the facility. So you can terminate it under certain circumstances.
You talking about terminating the CDD or the Sunshine Law?
CDD.
Not to get too off topic, but what usually happens in that case? What happens with the facilities and who manages them? And
I've not been in the circumstance of having one. I don't know if Chuck has. The one I know of in Collier County is one where no infrastructure was started, no debt had been incurred, Artesia.
Yeah, I've done a couple of those. They haven't incurred any debt.
That's the
No
key.
assets.
No debt, no assets.
We have a lot.
It gets more complicated than that.
Yeah, no.
It gets more complicated.
It pops up periodically in conversations throughout the neighborhood.
You've got a golf course.
Yeah.
Assets got to go to another
would-
public entity, so.
Yeah, and I don't have the statute in front of me, and I've never memorized it. One thing I learned a long time ago, don't pretend you know everything that's in the statute all the time. We reread them, and I find new stuff every time. I know it sounds crazy. So one aspect is if there's debt, you have, my recollection is, the local government has to assume the debt, which would be the village of Estero or the town. I'm sure they don't. I think they might get the assets also.
We don't want them.
But again, that's...
It's been brought up. It's in conversation within the community. It gets brought up periodically. It would be very, it would be very complicated for us to.
Just an example of that, in Stony Brook and Gateway, which is part of the Gateway CDD, which we represent. They had a question, the community did, about whether or not the roads in Stony Brook, which are owned and controlled by the CDD, could be conveyed to the HOA. We obtained the Attorney General's opinion that said no. In that case, it's a private. And interestingly enough, counties and cities have the ability to vacate roads, and in that case, they can send them to an HOA. But CDDs, the unique aspect of a CDD is the district has the explicit powers mentioned in the statute, express powers, and implied powers necessary to carry out those express powers. So it's not like home rule power that counties have, home rule power that cities have, where they can do almost anything as long as it's not contrary to the Constitution or state law. Generally, that's briefly. So it's generally circumscribed as to what a CDD can do. So as far as disposal of assets, I've always asked the question constantly, we have this road, how do we give it to the HOA? My opinion is, in order to dispose of that, you need to make sure it's declared surplus. And the only way to make it declared surplus is it's no longer needed for its originally intended purpose. So I don't know how you say a road is no longer needed for its originally intended purpose. So that's like the threshold. Then you get the second question from the AGO that was answered. As part of our monthly meeting agenda, there's an item for our attorney to give input. You have to be a participant or passive participant. I think I've addressed that. You keep up to date on issues affecting CDDs. Review your research with board members. Try to. There are 5 district courts of appeal in the state of Florida. You have the Florida Supreme Court. You have all 67 circuit courts around the state. And you have the Attorney General office issuing opinions. And you also then have the legislature at this time of year engaging in their activities. We try to keep up on it. And we subscribe to what's called a local government list serve. It's a group of local government attorneys around the state. And the various attorneys will ask questions, send information around, or bounce information off other attorneys. So we do try to keep up. If there are changes in the statute of law, typically I'll bring them to the manager's attention. And if it's minor changes, we make a sort of judgment decision whether to notify the board may say, why do we need to do that? But if there's major changes, typically we'll do a memorandum, provide that to the board and the manager as to those changes. Or if there's any new court cases out or anything we see around that may impact. For example, silly as it may sound, I was reading an article in the newspaper about a lawsuit against Lee County involving raised pavement markers that came loose on the Sturm or old water tower area. Some bicyclist hit that and went flying, or was located in the wrong part of the road. So I said, okay, and there's actually a standard by which you're supposed to place those blues RPMs relative to the travel lane of light. So I notified some of my managers for the CED, say, you may want to survey your fire hydrant markers to make sure that they're kosher. I mean, I know it sounds small, but slip and fall, stumble and falls, that's the cottage industry out there nowadays. And I tell you what, Chuck is manager, I'm not saying this just, I will, from the standpoint of managing the assets of the district, when there's any raised pavement, ADA non-compliant, very attuned to making sure it's marked and fixed to avoid the claim. Because those claims, even if you have a deductible of $5,000, add up, $25,000 here, $35,000 there, and it adds up over time. Because of the sunshine law, it's near impossible to discuss and or gather information on issues before a meeting. Often board members are in the dark when they see agenda items they have heard nothing about before the meeting. How do you recommend we're fully informed on new issues before a meeting? I guess the best way is, I know your agendas come out 7 days in advance. But if there is something that comes up in between, typically the manager or myself will send an email to the board members saying, let you know about this pending issue, do not reply to all, any questions, contact us directly. Now, one thing, a long time ago I learned, working in-house for Westinghouse Communities of Naples in Pelican Bay, the president said, don't surprise the boss. I don't want to be at a cocktail party on a Friday night with the county commissioner, and he says, hey, Ross, did you hear about or know about XYZ? And then Ross comes into the staff meeting on Monday and said, okay, guys, county commissioner asked me about ABC, and somebody says, yeah, boss, I knew about that. No, tell the boss, good, bad, or indifferent. So that's how we generally communicate with the board members.
Tony, one of the things we do try to do, if something comes up, the board member will email Chuck, and if Chuck feels the rest of the board needs to know or information, he will send it out from there. So
And that
that's
is a
kind
technique.
of what we're doing now, and we would continue that because I think it's important as best we can to let the board know.
You know, we agree with that concept and that one-way communication, and Chuck's in the office very careful. You know, the bold red letters, don't reply to all, and it sometimes may even send them out blindly to people so that the other people don't show up on the email. But Chuck's firm is very good about that.
Yes, they are.
In addition to the general fund, we run the irrigation and golf course fund. We recommend individual board members be assigned responsibility to work closely and or supervise the managers of those funds. The first question is really a threshold policy question, and that's the board's function, is to determine policy, and as I look at the attorney and the manager and staff implement the policy, provided it's valid and legal. I'm generally conservative about the concept of supervising the managers, because then you run into a delegation of authority issue. And then you run into a sunshine law issue. Sunshine law says if you delegate too much authority to one person, then you may have a sunshine law issue. I think the approach of a liaison and the person being more knowledgeable in a particular area, reporting back to the board, that's what I recommend to my boards.
Okay.
Let me see if I have anything else. Nothing further from the questions. If I missed any, please let me know.
Is there a per phone call and email rate for that particular instance if, you know, they wanted to communicate the board between each other, but they obviously can't because the sunshine law is all at one time, and that channel has to go through you? Is there like a per conversation or per topic, or is it per email, send and receive?
Per activity, if we have to do that. And we keep very detailed records, 1/10 or 2/10 of an hour. That was drilled into me many years ago when I began representing the clerk of courts in Cuyahoga County. He passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 64 a couple years ago, very early in life. But he was an attorney, white-collar criminal prosecutor, and CPA. So he wanted incredible detail for every building. So we use our best judgment when we bill. We don't overbill. That's our approach, our policy. And generally, those emails that are routed through will generally come from Chuck, or the manager, to the board.
So do you base it on a...
1/10 or minimum 1/10 of an hour increment.
So that's what it is, like you base that an email on a time scale, not a per email. It's you just
Correct.
like give it a time, a numerical number time.
Right. And an email will be, if it's a short email, it'll be 1/10.
Gotcha.
If it's a long email, like a novel.
Right.
If it's a mixture of
Yeah.
novel, it'll be a
Yeah.
I don't know, Lenore, any other comments on that?
The only other thing is Tony mentioned a little bit of litigation that we've represented or currently represent the tax collector, and he also mentioned some slip and fall things. So I wanted to also say that I do a lot of civil litigation. Tony does litigation. We have 3 other attorneys in our office that do litigation too. So in the terrible situation where litigation does become necessary, we are fully ready to also litigate government issues as well. So
Yeah, and on that, we believe in a cost-benefit analysis each time. I mean, we're not here for a $30,000 claim to charge $20,000 in fees. We recognize the significance of that and advise our clients accordingly on matters, because a lot of times it's painful to resolve and settle things. But the cost-benefit analysis, we've seen so many cases where it's an $18,000 claim to end up $100,000 in attorney's fees. That's nuts, pardon expression. That's just absolutely insane. And I think in working with management, especially like Chuck's firm, we walk through those kind of matters. And usually the carriers, insurance carriers, will handle the slip and falls, but we're there to assist them, provide some local information, local context for the judges, as well as information gathering.
I got a question. Say we go with your firm, how's the transition handled from your law firm to another law firm? And I'm sure there's a cost involved in that, from your experience.
It's hard to ballpark that cost.
Yeah.
We generally do it on an hourly basis, but again, I don't like to charge for a learning curve. I don't think that's appropriate. But in the initial data gathering and gathering documents and organizing them, I think we would charge for that. But to come up to speed with all your rules and regulations, I mean, I've read the golf course rules, looked at some of your minutes and some of the issues that you currently have pending. We do it on an hourly basis, but again, we're very conscious of billing.
Yeah.
We don't like to overbill.
How much the transition normally take?
Well, we had one recently where the transition was, we made the presentation one day, and next week we were in the council, and we had the ducks running the day after that because of that particular district. I think a 30 days is appropriate, because I'd like to talk to the council that was there before, just to get his flavor on the nuances of the various matters and transactions. Because you can't tell everything from black and white. There's always something behind the black and white.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question basically on our bonds and just in general. Because you work with CDDs, I'm assuming you have familiarity with bond language.
Yes, we've done the first bond issue that was back in 1994, 95 with Pelican Marsh, and it been issuers counsel on a number of bond issues since that time, and refunding issues for both Pelican for all the CDDs.
And do you typically keep that in-house? Do you ever seek out other opinions from other attorneys, or do you have that expertise in-house?
The typical transaction is we're as issuers counsel, there's bond counsel and underwriter counsel, and those are outside counsel. By the way, I was called outhouse counsel to the clerk for years ago, outside retained counsel. You get a little sign, keep signing, but yeah, you have separate bond counsel, sometimes separate tax counsel, and then you have underwriters counsel, and then we are issuers counsel. We don't do any tax work.
And Chuck, that's what we did when we got the bond, there was the bond council. And that's correct. That's normal, okay.
And
Because
we work with all those groups and review all the documents. Again, that's a good team effort each and every time. Financial advisor, manager, and all those folks.
because we have a bond coming due in
Couple of years.
a couple of years for the residents. We have one for the golf course in 2027. And then we are also looking to, we're going to have to redo the roads, so we're looking for a bond at that point for the roads. So that's something that,
Yeah, every district's facing that now, 20, 25, 30-year-old infrastructure. And the fun stuff is the subsurface stuff. We don't know it's really there until all of a sudden you get the guys who are going up about 20 feet, or you get phone calls from people who washed out road segment because of a collapse. Or you run into issues where you have rocks in the pipes. But we participated in numerous bond issues and bond validations. The most recent one was for Gateway. It was a different kind of validation. It was a borrowing validation, and left it wide open as to the source of how we would obtain the funding. It got real quickly, there's a lake bank erosion problem in Gateway, like a lot of communities have. And so Gateway undertook that program and applied to the state of Florida when the money was more readily available for a state revolving fund loan program. And interest rates are very attractive. And it can be a 5-year or 20-year borrowing. And one of the quirks of CDDs, if you have a maturity of more than 5 years of the borrowing, you have to have it validated. And that's one of the things that really sticks in my craw, that CDDs, even after all the resident members are resident registered voters, they still have to go through that process. But we validated that borrowing. We can go to a bank, we can go to the state, we can go all kinds of places to finance that program. And in that case, we had 6,000 parcels that they had to reassess to for that. So that was about 2 years ago. We did that 3 years ago, we did that validation. So we're familiar with validation. We know how to work with the state attorney's office and with the team to do that.
Phil, do you have any other questions?
No.
Jeff?
No.
John? No. Okay, I think you have answered all our questions. And I think the board as a whole, if things come up between the meetings, we as a group, if something comes up, we'll email Chuck. He'll get it out to all of us. And I would suspect if you were counsel that you would copy the chair, which is me at this point, and Chuck, and then Chuck would, we would work together. Overall, I think we have a good board here, and we're looking for some good direction and support. So, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you very kindly for the
Thank you very
opportunity.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I know I talk fast. I'm from Western New York originally, and I think my excuse is that I talk fast, my lips were not free shut in the winter times. Thank you.
I'm from Jersey, I get it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Thank you so much for attending. Is Dan on the phone?
I believe so.
Dan? Okay. You also, there were a couple questions that the board had for you. I'm assuming you have a copy of that as well. Do you want to answer some of those questions? Okay. Can we- yeah.
Sounds like the volume's low.
You're good to go, Dan.
Did you send me the questions?
Yes. They were circulated right after the electronic package went out. They were sent out in a separate email.
I don't see it.
Okay, well, Dan, maybe I can read the questions and you can give us your input. The first one was why was it recommended, why did you recommend that the district file for bankruptcy, even though Florida never had been granted protection, costing the community $25,000? Your recommendation was to file for bankruptcy. I guess that's the question.
What? That's been long ago. You know, when we were in the position that we were in, there is a provision under Florida law where you can petition the governor to file for bankruptcy. We went through that process. The governor declined to grant it. We had a change in government. We went through the process again. And we were again rejected.
Okay, so we...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We had a bondholder who had blocked all of our time, was refusing to negotiate with us, and there was no other means of forcing them to the table.
We tried to file bankruptcy
Now,
before.
fortunately,
Got the
with
bonds.
the petition to the governors were rejected, we did have that relationship that we had developed with Mr. Carter that allowed him to go in and buy the bonds from the then bondholder and restructure in a way that eliminated almost $6 million worth of your debt.
Okay. So you're saying that one time prior to that, they tried to file for bankruptcy?
We tried to file bankruptcy before the bond.
Because we twice went to the governor's office to try to get permission to file bankruptcy.
Before Carter came in and bought the bonds.
Right, but that's what he was talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did it twice.
Right.
But it was
Okay.
before, not after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's what you're saying. Okay.
And just, there was really, we didn't have any choice. I mean, it was either, I mean, that was,
That was the road we had
yeah,
to take.
there was nothing. I don't think that Dan led us down that road any more than any of us were looking at it going, well, what else can we do?
Right.
You know, from as far as filing bankruptcy, I mean, that's the only kind of protection we had.
Yeah.
We had no
But
way of getting.
No CDD had ever been
Oh, yeah.
granted.
And
It cost the community 25 grand.
But that was because the original bondholder was not willing
that's
to play.
if we want to talk to Dan, we can talk to Dan and we
Okay.
can ask him his questions. We can debate whether we should have or shouldn't have. But yeah, you're right. Nobody's ever been granted that, but there is a provision to do it. And I don't know where else we were going to get the money to continue on. At the end of the day, it's just like your business. But again, that's,
File bankruptcy.
yeah.
Okay.
there have been bankruptcies filed by districts that were granted, the authority by the governor. Hospital districts, there for a while, are notorious for defaulting on their bonds and having to go under.
Yeah, but I think what we're saying is no CDD had been granted that, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and we knew that at the time, but that was...
You were on the board at the time.
Yes, I was on the board at the time.
Right. So you've got more of the history, so I appreciate you jumping in with that. The other question was, why did you represent the bondholder and the district?
I did not represent the bondholder in the district.
Okay, you represented the district, but you had a relationship with the bondholder is what...
And that was disclosed openly, freely. If y'all had told me then that you felt it was a conflict, I would have stepped aside and had a different counsel come in and serve as if it was counsel for you.
Right, but the current board, when we were doing this, approved that, so that...
That's correct.
Okay, so the board at the time was on board with that, so... Now, the next question is, why did you put in the contract a clause that the district could not refinance the bonds costing the district close to $150,000 in interest? Was there a clause that...
I
Okay,
did not put that provision in because of the bond. The bondholder, the person that was selling you, they were restructuring your bond, put that in there, and that was fully disclosed to the board before they accepted the bond.
okay. Okay,
I don't know about...
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that last statement, fully disclosed, because when we agreed upon the bond, we talked about potentially paying the bond currently for a couple of years and then refinancing. And we openly discussed refinancing those bonds on a regular basis and went down the road of trying to where even Ed and Ron were meeting with, I believe, Wells Fargo and several other financial institutions. So if it was disclosed to us,